Hello, and thank you for joining me. This is going to be a quick one. I just want to talk briefly about the upcoming Olympic Games. And when I say upcoming, I mean upcoming in the now, relatively. I wasn't distant future would be the wrong term, but we now know of three Olympic Games that are to come, Summer Olympic Games. And this is a rather unprecedented situation. Usually, what happens is the International Olympic Committee will determine the host city 7 years in advance. So we know that in 2020, Tokyo will host the Games for the second time. They first hosted in 1964. Now, the IOC has just named the recipients, the host cities of 2024 and 2028 as Paris and Los Angeles, respectively. And this announcement event, which itself is, there's even some competition to be the city that announces the bid, that stages that ceremony, was in Lima, Peru. Um, so the two respective mayors, Anne Hidalgo and Eric Garcetti, um, seemed to reach a mutual agreement that one would not stand in the way of the other, and it was agreed that Paris would go first. This is unusual to name two cities at once. Um, Up until now, the precedent would have been to name the 2024 bid, and then the 2028 bid would have been named in 2021. It's always 7 years before the event. I've I've got mixed feelings about it. I'm not going to take anything away from Paris or Los Angeles. Clearly, the IOC has looked at their bids, has looked at their viability, has looked at the presentations. Both are great cities, so I'm not going to take anything away from that. I can't help but feel though there's something slightly boring about doing it this way. What I mean by that is, firstly, the next three bid cities, Tokyo, Paris, Los Angeles, have all hosted the Games before. Like I say, Tokyo in 1964, Paris in 1924, Los Angeles in 1984, and of course, London hosted three times. So I think there will be some people thinking, well, there's a bit of bias going on here. What about cities in developing countries that might want an opportunity to showcase? Of course, the Olympics in terms of preparation could be an enormously controversial issue. There's many examples of millions and in some cases billions being invested into this, and then the Olympic sites becoming ghost sites. Rio de Janeiro came amidst the Brazilian political scandal, and apparently a lot of the stadia that was used in the 2016 games are already in disrepair, or at least not being used. And I find that very unfortunate. I do remember at the time the big pitch that Rio de Janeiro put was, oh, it's so unfair that it's never been hosted in South America. They got the chance, and then that's what happened. And that's no disrespect to the good people of Brazil, but that is what happened. Um, so I think there's a lot of things that need to be taken into account. Certainly, in terms of viability, Los Angeles and Paris have proven that they have hosted games before, so they have the venues for it. But I can't help feeling it's a little bit dull, that there isn't going to be any new city over the next decade, just over a decade, 11 years. I would like to see a situation where we start seeing some cities that have never hosted before, but there are some parts of the world that will never get to host an Olympics, not necessarily for economic reasons, although that is part of it, but also for climate. It's something that we shouldn't underestimate. So, for example, Riyadh could never host an Olympic Games. There's a human rights issue in Saudi Arabia. That hasn't exactly stopped the IOC before. China, of course, got the Games in 2008, which was very controversial. But Riyadh, the climate would simply be too hot. Athletes would collapse. Delhi isn't going to be able to host the Games again, simply too hot. So there are some practical limitations on which cities can host the Games. I would like to see in the future some more Latin American cities. I would like to see some sub-Saharan African cities. There are cities in sub-Saharan Africa that are not that would have a relatively decent climate. Um, Maybe who knows, 50 years from now, Lagos could host the games. Um, Durban in South Africa. Um, the truth is, every city that could viably host it is going to have issues. I mean, Paris very recently had a spate of terrorist incidents, um, but that didn't stop it winning the bid. Los Angeles, well, I would say the crime situation has greatly improved since the race riots 25 years ago. I would say it's a safer city than at that time. Um, so yeah, let me know your thoughts. If you're from Paris, if you're from Los Angeles, how do you feel about it? Because we sometimes assume that all the people from a particular city will be very patriotic and kind of want their city or their country to win the bid. It's not necessarily the case. Quite often you get a situation where people say, well, this money could be better spent on hospitals or whatever. Um, I do believe that an Olympic hosting can do wonders for a city. And I have to admit, I'm proud of the fact London hosted 3 times. I feel overall we've done a pretty good job of it in 2012. I am proud of that. I can't deny that. Um, but, like I say, it just feels like, well, there's nothing really new here. All three cities that are coming up have hosted before. Um, In terms of the format, again, I'm not quite sure why they've done it that way. I think it's because the other cities, Istanbul and I believe it was one of the German cities, can't remember, dropped out. Um, so I don't really know how to feel about it. Um, Los Angeles 2028, Paris 2024. How do you feel about it? Thomas Bach, of course, is the IOC chairman. I don't know if he'll still be IOC president, I should say, in 2028. Personally, I would like to see a situation in the future where there is more cities that haven't hosted before getting a chance to host. There's even some Western cities. New York City has never hosted an Olympic Games, which is quite something when you think about it, given that it's such a prominent and well-known world alpha city. Um, there's many great cities that have never hosted an Olympics actually, but there may be opportunities in the future. Now, keeping on the theme of sports, I was going to make a separate video on this, but I don't know if I will or not. Canelo Alvarez versus Gennady Golovkin, middleweight title fight tonight. It's a fight that the boxing world has been waiting for. I'm not going to say that the world has been waiting for because I don't think it's had as much hype as Mayweather Pacquiao or Mayweather McGregor. But it is going to be a very interesting fight because these are two very capable fighters, very dominant fighters. And personally, I'd be happy with either guy winning. I like them both as fighters and as people. I think they're both decent men. Um, it's going to be a very interesting matchup. And this one really is 50-50. So be interesting to see what happens. Um, Unfortunately, because these big title fights are almost always in Las Vegas, the only time you can really tune in the UK is in the early hours of the morning. I'll be listening on the radio because I don't have pay per view. But sometimes that's just as interesting. Like I say, it's like old school, like 1930s, listening to the old Joe Louis, Max Schmeling bouts. Anyway, let me know your thoughts. What do you think of Paris 2024, Los Angeles 2028? And if you're a boxing fan, what do you think of Canelo versus Triple G? It'll be very interesting to see what happens. Triple G is obviously undefeated. Canelo's only had one loss to the greatest fighter in the world. So, both men have a lot of stake. Let me know your thoughts and thanks for watching.